tonight's City Council meeting. We're going to start the evening with public comment. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak tonight, and I just want to remind everyone of the rules of decorum. Please be respectful and please be kind. We will start with Octavia Rainey. Derek, is Miss Rainey on the call?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Octavia, we can
you
hear
hear
you.
me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay. I'm calling tonight to speak about infill development. I live at 1516 East Lane Street. My concern about infill development is infill development changes the characteristics of your neighborhood. For neighborhoods that has been created out of slavery, such as College Park, South Park, Joe Louis Park, Idlewild, Gregg Street, Home Street, Lenore Street, East Davis Street, Robertson Park, Cotton Place, Evans Bottom, South Street, Thompson Hunter 1, Thompson Hunter 2, the characteristics of these neighborhoods has changed completely, 150%. The second thing is that when you build these houses in black neighborhoods with no protections, then you build mansions right next to low-level houses, just like one next to me. So that causes the taxes to go up. But when you looked at infill development, y'all only looked at the pitch of the roof and the setback requirements. No one looked at how it changes the characteristics of a neighborhood. And when you look at the inner city, the characteristics of the neighborhood has changed 150%. And second of all, at one time, you could count the inner city as 100% black vote. Now, you can't even count the inner city as a block of black votes. There's something wrong with that picture. There's something wrong with infill development. Also, SB 25 passed June 19th, and according to Speaker Tim Moore, this bill is a triumph for conservative movement. So I am very concerned that the City Council is not even paying attention to the characteristics of neighborhoods in a city that was born out of slavery.
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Christina Jones.
8005 Finland Drive. TC 1920. Part of this text change limited the review time of the Planning Commission from 90 to 60 days. When I asked Councilor Fort at a neighborhood meeting why she voted for that change, the Planning Commission was taking too long in some cases. There's so much to unpack with that small exchange. One, as with rezonings, your typical Raleigh resident has no connection with TC 1920. Most don't know that TC stands for text change, or that it could be further explained as Raleigh wants to change the rules. Two, the social media post with the case number of a text change does not begin to explain to residents why this is an important topic for them to pay attention to. Three, Planning Commission is a dedicated group of volunteers who may have 40-hour-a-week jobs or families or lives outside the commission. To limit their time to review a project on a base of it was taking too long begs the question, too long for who? Four, Planning Commission used to ask what the CAC associated with a specific case voted to get a better understanding of what the affected residents actually wanted. However, without CACs, how does Planning Commission stay informed of what local residents want? Where is the robust engagement that council wants? They made a quick decision to cancel the strongest opportunity for engagement and have spent the last 21 months making up excuses that may sound good, like a consultant who will tell us how to do engagement better, but who turned in nothing and quit the task force that he created. What has been happening around the city while we've been fed lines of garbage? Lots of redevelopment with very little participation from the residents this council represents. Citizens Advisory Councils didn't work in this council's mind, yet they just created the Development Services Advisory Committee, which uses staff support for the development community to have a voice. Where is the space for residents' voices? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Donna Bailey.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name's Donna Bailey and I live at 710 Rosemont Avenue. I'd like to talk to you tonight about a great opportunity you have coming up. This opportunity to support the Cameron Village, Hillsborough Street Small Area Plan is a way for you to show Raleigh residents that you are listening to them and that you can be counted on to uphold the city's own policies and small area plan process. That case, Z6820 at the corner of Hillsborough Street and Bagwell, lies within the Cameron Village Hillsborough Street Small Area Plan. That plan, which is only 3 years old, had great support from all the stakeholders involved. The process to come to a consensus document took almost 2 years and involved over 450 people in a variety of meetings, including a 2-day charrette, and over 1,700 surveys completed. Before the small area plan, many rezonings were contentious. After requests from both the Hillsborough Street Community Service Corporation and the community, over $300,000 was voted on by council, including then Councilor Baldwin, to fund the process. Height was the topic that was most discussed, and no one got exactly what they wanted, just like President Biden. Since the small area plan has been in effect, there's been very little resistance to rezonings and many successful projects have been built in the area. The one 7-story parcel that was supported by the community was at 1912 Hillsborough Street and is on a roundabout and backs up to commercial property, so it cannot be used as an equivalent case. Thank you for voting that this case go to committee where it can get discussed by all interested parties. I certainly hope you will respect the process of the small area plan that the city funded and follow the plan that gives guidance to the height of 4 stories. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Sergey Kessel.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, 4516 Winchelsea Place. I'm concerned about we actually requested on transportation department send us information about specs and regulation about why they put like a stop signs, because we have 3 more cul-de-sacs over there. And it's a lot of complaining right now. It's a bring to concerns, and we need some answer. Also, I called to Commissioner Bafkin in many times because I want to see him what is going on our street, because he actually managed our district and he never called me back. Also city attorney tried to send city representative to give me hard time. I can tell you what, I survived socialism, what you do to me, it's very unconstitutional and discrimination. It's message for city attorney and commissioner. And also, I just want to tell you, in North Carolina, we don't even have a trade school. And what I can tell you what is affordable house is. It's mean if you can afford nothing, you're supposed to make more money and afford something. And also city inspector, don't even know terminology. Unbelievable. I just want to know, when we removing $30,000 no license in North Carolina. Also, I send you a list what need to be done in construction industry. It's ridiculous right now. And I want to put this one on agenda and talk more about, because to me that's not enough. And also, I just want to know when you send me specs and meeting and calculation about our street, Winchelsea Place.
Okay, thank you. You may remember that the item he's discussing was sent to committee and came back with a report. Next, we have Julia Corey.
Hi, I'm speaking to you on behalf of the entire staff of Saints and Scholars Irish Pub in North Raleigh, the talented local bands we employ to entertain our patrons, and our incredible faithful customers. And I just want to thank you, the mayor, the city, and the entire city council for working with us to get live local music back outside on our restaurant's patio. We will continue to be considerate of our neighbors while providing a safe place for our community to gather together, be entertained, and just enjoy life together. Thank you so much for all of your hard work to keep our city safe and healthy, and we would love to see each of you at Saints and Scholars soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also want to thank Councilmember Buffkin for bringing this forward and working with our staff to come up with a solution. So thank you, Julia, for calling in tonight. Next, we have Kathy Rudisell.
Good evening. I reside at 2317 Clark Avenue. Along with other members of my owners association, we wanted to speak to the city council about two issues. One is a critical issue, which is ingress, egress off of Clark Avenue onto Chamberlain. And the other is the residential parking program and what buildings qualify for this program. On the critical issue, as I've discussed with city parking department, when you exit off of Clark Avenue onto Chamberlain, it's a real issue with visibility. And we're concerned that someone at some point is going to have a collision because you can't see around the bend in the road because there are parked cars from our driveway entrance on Chamberlain, which is an 11-unit building, all the way to Clark Avenue. So what we're trying to do is have the city examine the site areas on that street and consider removing 4 of the parking spaces from our driveway on Chamberlain Street to Clark Avenue, so that there will be avoiding the potential for a collision on that street when people enter and exit off of Chamberlain onto Clark and off of Clark onto Chamberlain. I've also discussed this with the parking department. The second issue is the residential parking program. I understand there's a city policy that only single family dwellings can be admitted to the parking program. That being the case, our 11 unit owners on Clark Avenue are unable to get into the parking program and park on the streets adjacent to our building. We would like this policy to be reconsidered by the city council so that our building could be admitted into the parking program. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your time and your service.
Thank you. These are townhomes on Clark Avenue. City manager, could we have somebody look at this, look at the policy, and also look at the site views in this area? It's requested. I guess I'm a little surprised that only single-family homes would be allowed to use the parking program, because I know parking programs in Oakwood and in other places, have a mix of housing.
So yes, ma'am, we will bring back a staff report, and I do know that when the list came out on Friday, staff had already started to look at it. So we will potentially have something together by Friday.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Cole McMullen.
Cole McMullen, 10730 Foremost Drive, Raleigh 27617. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven to be a great risk to transit workers across the nation. Despite this enormous danger, the transit workers of Go Raleigh have continued to provide a high level of service to keep Raleigh residents safe on public transit. It is incomprehensible and unjust that Raleigh City Council would ask transit workers to brave the dangerous conditions of a global pandemic without providing both paid sick leave and hazard pay, but that has been happening for over a year and a half. I would ask that the Raleigh City Council act immediately to provide paid sick leave and hazard pay, including back pay, to transit workers of Go Raleigh. Further, I would ask that Council direct the Raleigh Transit Authority Board to seek a fairer management contract that provides fair compensation and better working conditions for transit workers with a publicly owned company such as Go Triangle. As a publicly owned company that is not beholden to shareholders to turn a profit, Go Triangle is an ideal candidate for managing Go Raleigh transit services and addressing the problems that private for-profit companies like TransDev have brought to Raleigh. On an unrelated issue, I'd like to say that the fact that CACs were disbanded while developer services advisory committees continue to exist is absurd and ridiculous to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right now, this process is managed by TransDev, and I believe that bids are being solicited for that process. But I don't know if Go Triangle has ever been considered as a potential candidate on this. So I will just leave it up to staff to maybe absorb this a little bit and come back with if there's any other additional recommendations. Thank you. Next was Jessica Meyer. She has withdrawn, and she was going to talk about the permit parking issue as well. Next, we have James Ida DeMarco.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Baldwin and council members. I live at 2404 Trenton Woods Way in Raleigh. Earlier this year, 100% of the Trenton Place homeowners on the president, signed a petition for no parking to eliminate the safety issues on two intersecting streets with dead ends in the cul-de-sacs. And in January, the council voted unanimously to extend that no parking, which did eliminate safety concerns at the subdivision entrance, and we thank you. Tonight, we request to eliminate that remaining 200 feet that we've been monitoring at your guidance since that January decision. Unfortunately, there's a group of people who continue to use and insist on using our subdivision as a default parking lot for Umstead Park and behave as such. And these same people, with exceptions, simply park farther down the street. And almost every car, whether they park or enter to look for parking, make an illegal U-turn. If you could go to slide 3, please, that'll show you the photos. As you can see, we're a narrow street, and right here, yeah, thank you. And unloading with pets, small children, bicycles creates safety issues trying to get around these folks. We've documented in the package that we sent you in advance, there's 1,400 spaces to park, and eliminating this 200 feet is really not going to create a problem for the overall Umstead Park visitors. We'd like, if you go to the last slide, if you really look at Trenton Road and Reedy Creek corridor, look, it's changing and it's going to continue to change. And as homeowners, what we fear most now is with bandwidth approved, the Trenton Road multipath connector now approved, increased traffic is going to draw people into this subdivision. And if you come in to park, or even if you come in just to look for parking, that's just as bad. So we respectfully request to eliminate this remaining 200 feet at a next consent agenda or when you feel appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been an ongoing issue for a number of years. I would say 4 to 5 years. We did ask them to continue to monitor the situation. Can we ask staff to follow up and look at this again and come back to us with a report and potentially a recommendation? Okay, thank you. Frank Harmon has withdrawn. Susan Mayama.
Susan Moriyama, 3413 Lewis Farm Road. Mayor and City Council, 12 days ago, One Wake gathered 600 people online and in person to make an excellent, well-considered proposal to provide property tax assistance to long-time, low-income homeowners here in Raleigh. Unless there is property tax assistance for these long-time homeowners, they will be forced to leave their homes behind for the wrecking ball. And their lives in Raleigh will be over, as will the hopes of their grandchildren who always thought they would have a home in Raleigh. These longtime homeowners are being burdened by unfair property tax policy driven by the unbridled development of historic neighborhoods which your administration supports. One Wake's proposal is you must have owned your home for at least 10 years and have a total household income of 80% of AMI or below, which is currently $61,300 for two people. Property tax assistance would be granted to any property tax that is greater than 2% of the total household income. Thank you, Council Members Branch and Fort, for keeping your word to look into this issue, and to the City Council for approving a motion for the Raleigh City staff to work with the Wake County staff to, in your words, see what program could be developed or to see what programs already exist that could help. I am not confident that an effective solution will be worked out in a timely way. What I hear is bureaucratic pass it off talk, from your desk to another desk and now to the county desk. Why can't you come out and say that One Wake's proposal is a great proposal and you will try to make that proposal work? We know you can act quickly and decisively if you want to. We saw you rush approval for John Kane's Downtown South project last year. Livable Raleigh asked you to act swiftly to grant the tax relief sought by One Wake. Please do the right thing now.
Thank you, Susan, for acknowledging Councilmember Branch and Councilmember Fort's support of One Wake. Just want to mention that the current program that we have actually is approved and had to be approved by the legislature. So there's state rules regarding this. So part of what we've discussed is how can we get word out about the current program to help people immediately as we work with the county, which collects our taxes, to address this issue. So thank you for bringing that up this evening. Next, we have Cheryl Tung.
Hi, Cheryl Tung, 1215 Barcroft Place. I serve as president of the League of Women Voters of Wake County. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My comments today are regarding the redistricting process that was approved at your meeting earlier today. The League applauds the efforts of this council to seek input from organizations like the League, Common Cause, NAACP, and others as you navigate this redistricting process. I would also like to give special thanks to Councilmember Patrick Buffkin for holding the recent virtual town hall on redistricting that provided the public with the opportunity to better understand the process and the importance of transparency. The League supports a redistricting process that invites public participation at every stage. As such, we would like to offer a few additional suggestions to consider as you move forward, with the understanding that some of these may already be part of your ongoing discussions. We encourage the council to develop a well-thought community engagement and outreach plan at the start, one that includes an easy-to-find redistricting webpage and includes the following: a description of your process, criteria, census information, public comment portal, meeting notices, translator services information, a timeline of the process, and a detailed descriptions of all persons who will be involved in carrying out the process. We ask that robust outreach efforts be made to inform and educate. And we ask that minority community representatives are given a seat at the table to ensure that they too have a voice in the process. Simply put, the public must understand and trust the process in order to understand and trust the maps. In addition, we encourage you to conduct public hearings both before and after maps have been drawn. Citizens do want to speak to map makers about their communities, and they want to provide input beforehand to allow maps to be drawn that reflect their concerns. Thank you again for all your efforts, and we hope that you will continue to develop a process that engages the community and ensures both trust and transparency, all which are crucial to our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we have Hua Huang.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hua Huang, 7401 Ebenezer Church Road. This past Saturday, Wake County Housing Justice Coalition has taken part in the first eviction clinic organized by Wake County. The event was well attended, and rest assured, will not be the only eviction clinic this county and the city need to be organizing for the people here. But we also know this is not the only thing we should be doing to address housing needs in Raleigh and Wake County. Since 2010, Wake County lost 59% of the stock of its rental unit, priced below $750 a month, and 40% of the unit priced below $1,000 a month. And now the county approved a $10 million loan as part of the effort to establish the Affordable Housing Preservation Fund. What is Raleigh doing with existing affordable housing for low income? should be noted that on March 2021, our coalition organized a webinar about a need to save existing affordable housing 7 months before the county said they committed to doing so. And since our webinar, Raleigh has torn down the house at North Carver Street and decided to fix Heritage Park by tearing down and giving up this city-owned property and black neighborhood to the market rather than looking for ways to repair. Is Raleigh tearing down Heritage Park to push out the black community? Heritage Park will be affected by Dick's Edge area study, but the city has completely ignored the residents there and would rather talk to the residents at Gateway Park, which is only 0.3 miles away from Heritage Park. Raleigh only intends to build housing at 60% AMI or below. The information gathered from the interactive map on citydata.com, however, reflects that Carolina Pines and Fuller Heights have median income of $37K, to whom 60% AMI cannot be affordable. This all brings to the city's commitment to address systemic racism into serious question. The only housing choice you're offering to the black community in the disenfranchised and marginalized is gentrification. Please stop tear downs, preserve housing affordable to low income instead, and prioritize repair and rehab. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Douglas Johnston. And I think we can all probably guess what Douglas is going to talk about this evening.
There are no surprises in Raleigh. Well, there are a lot of surprises, and some of them are the many dimensions of Dick's Park's success. So first slide, please. Here's one of the edges at Centennial Campus, and we're all invited to participate in their survey about its master plan. There's been a lot of park and campus cooperation. All of it's very good, and it's all a drop in the bucket to the potential. Next slide, please. This is a typical park open space, and it's as well equipped as could be achieved by the best landscape designers. It, and like others like it, unfortunately, are ours to lose, but I think we'll avoid that. Last slide, please. Well, that makes me the next to last slide. This is a street along the park and play area between Dal Adams and Fuller. Next slide, please. This is the cross section of it as currently proposed. Next slide. And this is what it looks like now, which may turn out to be closer to what we really want to see there than we can imagine. I'm looking forward and hope that you'll get staff assurance about the fulfillment of the potentialities here. We don't need to look at any more slides. I got over ambitious. And there's not any lack of talent on the staff. It's the best anybody's ever seen. Once you get their assurances, don't stop there, but test those assurances. And there's plenty of talent for that too. You might be surprised, in fact, to learn who some of them are. And call me, not for assurance.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Appreciate that and your comments about staff. Next, we have Adina Safta.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Adina Safta, and I'm currently a candidate for U.S. Congress covering the downtown district and a small business owner located at 207 Fayetteville Street. I'm here to address continued concerns with regards to Fayetteville Street, the spine of our capital city. Mayor, are you aware that a small business owner closed its doors this week, leaving Raleigh after serving our community for several years? On October 19th, I addressed the war zone on Fayetteville Street, the parking concerns, the homelessness and crime, the lack of care and appeal for residents, visitors, tourism, and those relocating to Raleigh. Gentlemen downtown causing daily business disruption, which as a matter of fact is outside screaming as we speak. Our American flags lining Fayetteville Street. My call to action was on October 19th, and the flags went up yesterday, November 1st. Given the length of time that it took, I'm going to assume that it's due to the upcoming holiday, Veterans Day, and not related to you taking action. With all due respect, Mayor, your common sense leadership is clearly not that of the people, community, and our nation. My new call to action is that you resign from the mayor position so that it can be filled with a leader whom is passionate about the people, its community, and our nation. Thank you.
Next, we have Richard Johnson.
(3225) Oak Grove Circle. Local news has reported that the city is hiring a real estate firm to handle purchases to help with Raleigh's affordable housing crisis. Here we go again with another way for this mayor and the Council of Kane to line the pockets of their donors and supporters with our tax dollars. Wonder which of the mayor's backers will get this lucrative contract. Wonder why the real estate community doesn't do some pro bono work to show their support for affordable housing. Are they all just lining up once again to feed at the taxpayer-funded trough? Isn't it enough that the mayor is having a high-priced campaign kickoff and planning to wine and dine the very people who are profiting from her regime? Quite the mutually beneficial relationship for the well-connected, while less well-connected longtime residents of Raleigh are forced from their homes by the mayor's refusal to lessen the impact of development on affordability. This mayor seems to be going for a new low in her race to the bottom to make sure her supporters and donors profit from her time in office. I guess personal profit is why these fine, upstanding citizens have stood by silently while the mayor and her cronies stole an extra 8 unelected months in office. Why aren't they standing up for democracy rather than their own personal profit? Those of us who love Raleigh need to stand up and say, enough. Raleigh is our home, and we don't just see it as a business opportunity. We don't just see it as a place to cut down every tree and replace it with concrete. Concrete probably bought from Barnhill Contracting. We don't just see it as a place to tear down naturally occurring affordable housing and replace it with luxury high-rises. Luxury high-rises probably developed by the mayor's sugar daddy, John Kane. Enough is enough. We want a city you don't have to be a millionaire to live in. A city for the people who actually keep it running. Bus drivers, teachers, first responders, sanitation workers. Enough is enough. Vote them out.
Oh, sorry, Kathleen Milligan is next.
Hi, 2307 Clark Avenue. And I want to reinforce some of the points that Kathy Rudisill made in her previous comments, just by adding some anecdotes. So starting with the issue about ingress and egress on Chamberlain Road, several of our neighbors have reported that they had near misses, and that's only the ones that we know about. I spent about 10 minutes on Chamberlain Street near Clark, just observing on Sunday. I saw two cars head on, and one of them, luckily, this was Sunday, so there wasn't a lot of traffic, was able to back up, go into an empty driveway beyond ours, allow the first car to pass, and then go on about its way. But imagine if this were on a busy traffic day, there could have been a very different outcome. I also observed a truck going towards Clark Avenue on Chamberlain. A car that was trying to turn onto Chamberlain had to pause kind of catty corner on Clark, which I think is dangerous, until the truck could exit and there was enough room for that car to go on to Chamberlain. So these really are dangerous conditions, not just for us in Clark Townhomes, but all of the drivers in the area. And then going on to the second issue that Kathy raised, joining into the permit program, we have a great deal of difficulty finding parking spaces when we have tradespeople come to do work in the area. And we also have a great deal of trouble finding spaces for visitors. So we like the idea very much of participating in the permit program, including the ability to purchase 24-hour permits in advance that would allow us to accommodate tradespeople and visitors in a way that we can't right now. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I would like to thank all of the council for your public service.
Thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Next, we have Wanda Gilbert Coker.
Good job.
Thank you. I thought yours was great. I wish we had been right after the other.
Oh, we can hear you. So please mute while we try and get Wanda Gilbert Coker on.
Mayor, Ms. Coker is not on the line.
Okay, next we have then Jerry Miller.
Hello, I'm Jerry Miller at 3325 Tall Tree Place. Thank you for allowing me to speak today about trees. Not just any trees, but those increasingly rare, old, large trees around Raleigh that can take our breath away if we pay attention. Trees are a big part of the reason that we moved to Raleigh 30 years ago, lured by its special blend of community, opportunity, and green spaces. Trees. Raleigh is called the City of Oaks. It's been designated Tree City, USA. Can I have the first slide, please? Thank you. We represent our magnificent trees all over Raleigh and highly celebrated public artwork. For example, this is Green City, USA mural. Next, please. Thomas Sayre's The Shimmer Wall. Next slide. I found this mural when I walked into the Hampton Inn last week. And one more. Here's an abstract tree from the North Carolina Museum of Art, not far from my home. Next slide, please. And finally, this is a real tree near my home, a magnificent oak about 100 years old on private property, but highly visible from the street. It sits on a section of road that's to be improved with wide paths for walking and biking and a sculpture walk. And yet, I've learned from city forestry and others that there are few city protections for this and similarly majestic individual trees on private property all over Raleigh. That makes me ask myself, are we doing enough? Are we the city of oaks, or are we just becoming the city of artwork about oaks? I know little about land use law, but I know that Raleigh can do better. I understand from Councilor Knight that some on council are already working on this issue. I urge them to consider enhanced protections for these types of irreplaceable, majestic trees, even on private property, and especially those that beautify our streetscapes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, just to clarify, I believe that the Growth and Natural Resources Committee is looking at this and has asked staff to look at it, reviewing the enhancement of our tree protection rules. So your comment is very timely. Thank you for being here today, and we'll keep you informed of progress. Okay, let me see here. I'm trying to get back to my grid so I can see everybody. Okay, thank you to everybody who came out this evening. Now we have the public hearing part of our meeting tonight. I just want to mention that Jonathan Melton is absent this evening and excused. So we will begin with sewer assessment roll 1358 Westinghouse Boulevard B. No one has signed up to speak on this.
Donetta Powell from Transportation. This is the Westinghouse Boulevard sewer assessment roll. This is for a sewer line extension that was completed back in 2018. And of course, no one has signed up to speak for the public hearing.
Could you just give us a little bit of information on this?
Absolutely. We have a presentation. I was waiting for that to come up. This is the Westinghouse Boulevard Sewer Extension Project. And again, this project was completed back in 2020. This was for a sewer line extension for one of the businesses there along Westinghouse Boulevard. It only affected 3 parcels. This is the area along Western House Boulevard and Operations Way where the sewer line was extended. This is in Council District B. And this was a citizen request to serve 2531 Westinghouse Boulevard for approximately 120 feet, installing an 8-inch sewer main extension. This project will be accessible at a rate of $62.25 per linear foot and the assessment for this was $9,305.75, and that was paid in advance. So this is a picture of the area that was impacted by the sewer line extension, and this is an assessment map. Any questions?
Do we have any questions of staff? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Cox.
Yeah, I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Branch has seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have sewer assessment roll 1357 Hill Street.
Yes, Mayor Baldwin. This is the Hill Street Sewer Extension Project. This was a project that was directed back in 2017 and completed in 2018 along Hill Street. This is an overview of the location that was constructed off of Skycrest Drive on Hill Street. This was to serve one property. It was a citizen request from 2305 Hill Street to serve approximately 280 linear feet of 8-inch sewer main to serve that parcel. And this was an assessment that was based at $62.25 per linear foot. The assessment amount of $6,175.20 has been paid in advance. This is a picture of the location serving that property. Again, this was directed back in 2017. And this is a sewer assessment map showing the location of the parcel that was improved. Any questions?
Do you have any questions of staff? Okay, again, no one has signed up to speak. So I will, Councilmember Cox.
Oh, I was going to move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, I will open the hearing then and close the hearing, and you can now make that motion.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? Mayor Pro Tem Stewart has seconded that. All in favor? Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have rezoning Z6720 Blue Ridge Road. We have people who signed up in support and people in opposition. What I'm going to do this evening is, like we heard this case last time. Councilmember Knight has asked that we allot 5 minutes per side. For this, my understanding is there's a number of new conditions that will be added, but first we'll hear from staff on this report. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Bynum Walter, Raleigh Planning and Development. This, as you mentioned, Madam Mayor, has been in front of the council before, so public hearing was opened October 5th, continued to the 19th, and again to this evening. And there are a handful of new conditions that have been offered since this was in front of you 2 weeks ago. So the applicant has restricted hours of operation for non-residential uses on Saturday and Sunday, has limited building height to 2 stories within 100 feet of Blue Ridge Road. They're requiring a 20-foot building setback from Blue Ridge, requiring exterior building lighting to be turned off in the evenings, limiting hours for dumpster collection, promising for the provision of a bench and bicycle repair station to be installed, and also specifying some landscaping along Blue Ridge Road. So that's what's new on the case this evening. Any other questions for me before you hear from the applicant? And I believe there is a citizen signed up to speak in opposition to this.
Okay, so have those conditions been submitted?
Yes, ma'am, we have the conditions and signatures as needed, is my understanding.
Okay, so if we were to close the hearing tonight, it would then move to the next meeting, or because the conditions have already been submitted, we could vote?
You could close the hearing and act on the conditions I just described. You could act on those this evening.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start with the applicant. So I'm opening the hearing. And if we could have the countdown timer on 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. It's Michael Birch. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. If you could go to the next slide, please, and we can just leave it there. Again, my name is Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners. Also on with me this evening is Todd Irvin, pastor at the Summit Church, Jeff Murison with the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance, and Dave Wysachansky with the HOA of the adjoining townhome community, all of whom will speak briefly this evening. As a reminder, the purpose of this request is to allow for a medical office building as the new home of Wake Internal Medicine, a practice that has been located on Blue Ridge Road since 1980, and a practice that includes Dr. Stuart Levin, who has dedicated much time and passion to Blue Ridge Road, the revisioning of Blue Ridge Road for over a decade. At the October 5th public hearing, Council continued the public hearing so that we could go and meet, continue our conversation with folks that lived in the neighborhood across Blue Ridge Road. And thanks to the help of Councilor Knight, Megan Hinkle, we met on site with a group of neighbors for about 2 hours. And then based on those conditions, we added, enhanced 8 conditions addressing their primary concerns about how the building relates to Blue Ridge Road. We limited height to 2 stories for 100 feet off the street. We required a minimum setback, irrespective of height, of a minimum of 20 feet, as well as providing landscaping between the building and the road. All of those intended to ensure that the building will fit in to the fabric of Blue Ridge Road and the city's widening project. As Bynum mentioned, we also provided a number of conditions that actually address kind of the possible impacts like lighting, servicing dumpsters, hours of operation, and added a number of conditions related to those items. We then had a follow-up discussion with the same group about these conditions. And again, I believe that only one person has signed up in opposition this evening. We have been in this process for over 11 months, during which time we've engaged with surrounding stakeholders, diligently addressed the comments. The only item raised that we couldn't address is committing to a certain building architecture, and that just isn't something that we can commit to at this stage. So again, we've done all that we can do through these conditions and ask for your support tonight. And as a reminder, this case is consistent with the future land use map, urban form map, comprehensive plan, compatible with the surrounding area, and received a unanimous recommendation of approval from Planning Commission. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Todd Irvin, pastor with the Summit Church.
Good evening, Council. Again, this is Todd Irvin. I'm an executive pastor with the Summit Church. The Summit Church owns 14 parcels and is currently under contract to sell 4 of those acres to the Keith Corporation for the medical office building that was just mentioned. We approve of Keith Corp's plans for this portion of the property, and we believe it would add positively to the neighborhood and the area of the Blue Ridge Road, especially given the city's widening project. The church looks forward to having the Keith Corp and their project as our new neighbor, and we believe it would benefit the area and be compatible with the surrounding area, and look forward to having them as neighbors. We have agreed to share parking with the future medical office building, which will allow overall less parking, and it will serve the needs of the church as well as the medical office building. We respectfully request that the City Council approve the rezoning meeting at the rezoning at tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we have just about 1 minute left. Is there an additional speaker on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening. Jeff Murison, Executive Director of the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance. The developers of this property met and engaged with the Alliance and our development review panel over a number of occasions. The conversations were positive and constructive and included a full review of the project. The developer was responsive to our recommendations, especially to shift the building to the front of the property, adjacent to the sidewalk. And as such, the Alliance is comfortable with this project moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are 40 seconds left. Would you like to reserve this?
Mayor, 1 second. I have David. I have to unmute. They've asked for him.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dave.
My name is Dave Warsachansky. I live at 4011 Baileyfield Drive, and I'm the president of the Original Townhomes HOA since 2017. Our HOA has been following this rezoning case through the public hearings, the Planning Commission, and the City Council, and have discussed this at multiple board meetings. We've been working with Patrick Falter, the developer, and his legal and engineering team on our concerns. In addition to the adding of numerous zoning conditions, the developers team has also shared the details of their anticipated development plans and worked to minimize any impacts to our property. We appreciate the developer's efforts and believe Mr. Faulkner is an honest individual who has been working with us in good faith. We have no objection to the new conditions that have been added, but would not want any additional conditions that would move any further building or parking area further away from Blue Ridge Road. As an owner myself and a president of the HOA board, I support this rezoning and ask the council to approve it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Your time is up now. Next, we will hear from those who are opposed. I have one person who has signed up. That is Roger Corner.
Can you hear me? This is Roger.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for your time. I'm Roger Corner at 4136 English Garden Way. I back up to the Blue Ridge Road. I want to thank the council members that have visited the site and for the responsiveness of the applicant over the recent weeks. I'm here to speak on behalf of the over 130 neighbors that have either been involved directly or have signed petitions against this rezoning. We have tried since last spring to advocate the best use of this property by leaving it R4, or at a minimum, some kind of residential. I'll explain why we're asking for a no vote. The site is surrounded on all sides by primarily R4, including the churches and other residential zoning also. One exception is the small 2-acre office parcel next door with one-story buildings that were built in the late 90s. Rezoning the site in question would perpetuate what could be called spot zoning that was done 20 plus years ago. Other than that parcel, the site is not contiguous to any office zoning. The site is well buffered with multiple residential developments to the south, which would be where the Blue Ridge Corridor is, but we're buffered by residential from the Blue Ridge Corridor. The street has been stepped down for more intense uses, and the R4 zoning continues north on Blue Ridge on both sides for over a mile. I'm just asking, why would we want to step up the intensity of the use again? The rezoning is not compatible with the land use plan and comprehensive plan, both of which call for institutional. The way the rezoning is conditioned permits a large general office building to be built. An insurance office, tax service office, attorney, etc. could be located. They aren't institutional. The land use plan labels church properties that are currently R4 as institutional if they're over 2 acres. That applies to the churches at this site. I don't think the intent of institutional, if you read what's in the land use plan, the comprehensive plan, was for a standalone office building to put on excess church properties that are zoned R4. If you look at other nearby churches, some of which have parcels of land, they also show as institutional. I don't think rezoning to office makes sense here or there. The applicant has added some much appreciated conditions for the rezoning and has given us an appreciation of the constraints the developer is dealing with. However, at the end of the day, with these zoning conditions, we can end up with a large general purpose office building 20 feet from the right of way of our residential street. Considering the fact that the land itself is higher than the surrounding land, an office building of this size would overwhelm the streetscape and the neighborhood. For reference, neighboring buildings and townhomes are set back 50 feet. You can understand why it isn't reasonable to have a large office building squeezed into the middle of this neighborhood. Since this case was filed, the uses of R4 have been expanded. There are now even more viable and best use options for this property. There are also other residential options that would benefit the neighbor and be the best use for the city of Raleigh. Not all of West Raleigh streets need to have offices. It's not the best use. Office buildings belong on 4-lane, high-capacity streets that aren't residential. This is not a compelling reason to rezone this property. Please consider the fact that the city is going to great expense to enhance the residential section of Blue Ridge Road, keeping it at just 2 travel lanes. It's staying at 2 travel lanes. The widening project sends the wrong connotation. We respectfully ask you to vote no on this rezoning application. In doing so, you will be voting to preserve a soon-to-be enhanced residential neighborhood. If you feel you can't vote no, please give us the time to condition the zoning to limit the general office use, location, and appearance of the building. Thank you.
Sorry again. All right, so Councilmember Knight, do you have any particular comments you'd like to make before I close the hearing?
Sure, Madam Mayor, I appreciate it. Thank you, and I appreciate the comments tonight and the ongoing comments, and especially the effort that's been put in by the neighbors working with the applicant, and also the applicant to continue to listen to them and make more conditions. I believe the applicant said they have made all the conditions that they can. There's maybe one outstanding issue is the architectural design issue. But other than that, they believe that they've met all the requests made by the neighbors. This corridor, as was mentioned, is getting ready to be upgraded with a comprehensive streetscaping, which is exciting for that area. I do think, given the practicality of this piece of this parcel, that this is the best alternative that we're going to get. And again, I think they have worked hard with the neighbors to get there. I agree with Ms. Miller, who spoke earlier. I'm disappointed that we can't save that magnificent oak tree, and I'm glad she brought the issues up in public comment. I know that I and some others, some other counselors are very interested and concerned about the limitations on our tree preservation rules, and staff is looking into this and is going to come back to us with after a comprehensive review, and hopefully we will be able to make some movement forward on this issue, because it is very important, and we've seen what has happened with the limitations that we have right now. So hopefully we can make some progress on that in the near future. There has been a request, as Mr. Corner said, and Ms. Miller stated in an email, to hold this either open or closed and come back in 2 weeks. I'll leave that to the pleasure of the council. I'm comfortable to move forward, but I'm glad also to give more time. I'm just not sure if there is any more left to discuss, but I'm glad to do that if the council would like for it to stay open or closed and given 2 more weeks.
Clerk?
Yes, I just wanted to indicate that you have received a number of emails on this, and I have forwarded them to you, some in support and some in opposition. Just wanted that as a part of the record.
Okay, so I have a question for staff. Well, first off, is there an opportunity for any more conditions to be included in this, or have we?
Right, so where we are in the process, the public hearing is still open, and conditions can be modified to be more restrictive as long as the hearing is open. And then once you close the hearing, the conditions can still continue to be modified for an additional 30 days.
Okay, so we don't have a deadline on this like some of the other ones that we have?
Well, you can hold the public hearing open as long as you like.
Mayor Pro Tem Stewart.
Thank you. Kind of listening to everybody's concerns and hearing Councilmember Knight, it sounds like this thing is pretty much wrapped up in terms of how far it's going to go. And so I would urge us to go ahead and take a vote tonight, close the hearing, and go from there.
Okay, do we have any other feedback? Okay, hearing none, I will then close the hearing. Councilmember Knight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It does not sound like council, or I guess it does sound from silence that council and from the Mayor Pro Tem's comments that council is ready to move forward on this. I appreciate, again, everybody's effort and time in this case. I think we've gotten to the best conclusion that we can. And I will now move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 2nd, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Stewart. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously, clerk. Thank you. And thank you to the applicant for listening and for the conditions that were brought forward. Thank you to the neighbors for the engagement and coming out this evening. Thank you. Okay, next we have rezoning Z4621 on South and Saunders. No one has signed up to speak in opposition. We'll ask for a quick briefing by staff.
Of course. So this is a handful of parcels that total less than an acre. The request is to go from NX as the base district to IX and to add some conditions here. This is consistent with a comprehensive plan. However, it is inconsistent with the future land use map. Planning Commission recommended approval. It's an overview, an aerial view of the site. So there's a former bank building and former service station on the site that are proposed for adaptive use as part of this project. They have prohibited a number of uses here and then have specified that some uses are allowed, but with prohibitions on amplified music. They have limited the light manufacturing and research and development uses that come with the IX district. So they're conditioning the IX district down to limit what might otherwise be allowed in terms of operation, hours of operation, gross square footage, and deliveries. They are providing for a fence on the eastern property boundary, and then they're also providing for some bicycle parking on the site. So the change here, the residential density is actually going down. The office square footage maintained. The change is that they are allowing 2,000 square feet of industrial use here. And I believe the applicant can talk a little bit about the proposed use. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan, a number of consistent policies here, inconsistent with the future land use map, and because of the reduction in housing capacity potential there, inconsistent with that policy. And as I mentioned, since it's inconsistent, it is inconsistent with the future land use map, that would require an amendment to the future land use map from neighborhood mixed use to business and commercial services. Again, the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing and hear from the applicant?
Councilmember Cox.
The one vote against, what was the reason?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What was the reason for the vote against this by a member of the Planning Commission?
Right. So the Planning Commissioner that voted against felt like the rezoning was really pursuing uses to serve future residents, not current residents of the area. And her concern was for the residents of the Raleigh Housing Authority neighborhood that's just south of this, south of South Street.
Do we have any other questions for staff? Okay, I am going to open the hearing. Again, no one has signed up in opposition. I believe Molly Stewart is here representing the applicant.
Thank you. This is Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. I do have Greg Kelly here as well with Vault Craft Beer. He's the owner of the property. I will keep my comments very brief and be available for questions, but I did just want to note, if you could go to the third slide, I think that's helpful. Thank you. So the applicant has owned these parcels for several years. He would like to make it the home of his own business, Vault Craft Beer, selling beer and wine and serving as a tasting room. We did meet with 18 neighbors and others who came to our neighborhood meeting. We heard quite a bit of support. We heard no opposition. And that's true even when we included those sort of limited light industrial uses. And the idea there is that perhaps someday there could be some employment uses on the site as well. We could go one more slide. Thank you. So this is the former First National Bank building, and this is the intended future home of Vault Craft Beer. While the building you just saw would remain in an automotive use as it is today and has been for decades. And with that, I'll just make us available for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Cox, you have a question?
Yes, I mean, do you have to be zoned IX in order to have this use?
Yeah, so the big picture idea here, the reason that we have the need for the IX is that there are really three important drivers of that. One is the outdoor seating, which is limited in that NX. The other, and back to the outdoor seating, just given the small size of that existing building that the applicant would like to reuse, the outdoor seating will be very important. It's also driven by the need to clearly permit a brewing use, which, although it's not immediately anticipated, is hoped for in the future at a limited scale. And as well, that light manufacturing is also something that comes with that IX zoning.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing then. Let's see. This is in District D. Councilor Fort, do you have any, are you ready to make a motion?
I am, unless there's further discussion.
There were no more questions.
Okay. This is my motion to approve. I move to adopt a proposed consistency statement dated November 2nd, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, excuse me, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Okay, do we have a second? Councilmember Branch is seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Clerk, that was unanimous. Next is text change TCZ 521 Woodsboro Place.
Yes, ma'am. This is a text change to zoning condition, so it would change the conditions that apply to the 0.82 acres on Woodsboro Place. Currently, so the base district and the height are not changing here. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but it is inconsistent with the future land use map, and Planning Commission recommends approval. So a couple of views of the site. So they are prohibiting motels, hotels, vinyl siding is prohibited, specifying some building materials for building facade, and also prohibiting synthetic stucco. So the change here, there's no change in the in any of the square footage or units. It's really just in the conditions. Consistent with the plan overall and consistent with the future land use map, because it's currently it's already inconsistent with the future land use map as it's currently zoned. But the text change to zoning conditions is prompting a change to future land use map, so it would be, the future land use map would change from high density residential to office residential mixed use. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing and hear from the applicant?
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing. Worth Mills is here on behalf of the applicant, and I should note that no one has signed up to speak in opposition. So if we could start the timer.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. If you could just go to the 6th slide, and I'll keep my comments very brief and make myself available for questions. So this is a text change to zoning conditions that would remove outdated architectural zoning conditions, replace those with new conditions that dictate building materials, and create adequate flexibility for the construction of 12 single-family homes. Property owner currently has pending building permits for 12 single-family homes. And we think that by removing these conditions, we are creating additional flexibility in building design. We are allowing for quality and attractive homes just outside of the downtown core. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any plans for any accessory dwelling units on the properties?
I don't believe there are, but we have kept that option available. At Planning Commission, we originally had a condition that stated no more than 12 dwelling units on the property, but we have removed that after discussion at Planning Commission to allow for, redevelopment in the future. Obviously, that's very far out, but I think given the size of the lots, I'll note that these are non-conforming lots that were approved by Board of Adjustment. And so with single family homes going on those lots, I'm not sure that there would be adequate space, but if there was a recombination in the future, again, we have left that option open.
Any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Branch.
Mayor, I'm ready to go ahead and move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 2nd, 2021, containing the agenda
I
materials.
have to close the hearing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Getting ahead of me there. I will close the hearing, but before you do, I just want to, the question I asked about accessory dwelling units, I want to just make sure that Worth and others who represent clients understand that this council wants to see some diversity in housing as well, to include affordability and housing choice. So going forward, I would urge you to keep that in mind. Thank you. Councilmember Branch.
All right, I'll start over. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 2nd, 2021, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda items. Under recommended action, this approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Do we have a second? Mayor Pro Tem Stewart has seconded. All in favor? Reluctantly, putting my hand up because I would like to see more diversity. But that passed unanimously. Clerk. Next, we have Comprehensive Plan Amendment CPA 21 Rock Quarry Battle Ridge.
That's right. This is a citizen-initiated request to amend both text policies and the map in the Rock Quarry Battle Bridge Small Area Plan. Planning Commission is recommending approval to you. You can see the Rock Quarry Battle Bridge project area or area plan area in the map on the right. So this is south of Battle Bridge, east of Rock Quarry, right where they meet, where they fork, southeast of downtown. And here's what that area looks like on the ground today. So the amendment would add some language to the map, which makes some specifications about proposed streets, noting that where residential uses are developed, the proposed traffic circle is not recommended. So the area plan initially brought forward this recommendation for a traffic circle that was tied to an expectation of mixed use or commercial development here. The applicant, I believe, has initiated this because they are likely to pursue residential development and they don't want to build a traffic circle if they go with the residential use. So they're asking that notation to be added to the map and then also adding language in this policy about design guidelines that where the roundabout or the traffic circle would be this focus for commercial or where commercial or mixed use is developed, but that where residential uses are developed, the proposed streets illustrated in the map would be designed as local street standards appropriate for the density of the development rather than the more robust or larger street section that would come with the mixed use or commercial mixed use development. And then they're also here making, again, reference to the local street standard in the event of residential development. Further, expanding the option for traffic management in lieu of the traffic circle. So some kind of other intersection or pedestrian-oriented traffic calming device, trying to create some options in the event of residential development here that stops short of the full-blown traffic circle. And then also setting up the possibility for development to be supported by alleys. Consistent with the plan overall, consistent with the future land use map, with the urban form map, consistent. And again, recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. What questions could I answer for you before you hear from the applicant during the public hearing?
Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, just to be clear, the applicant is stating where they are putting residential, then there would be no circle. But if it is commercial, the circle would be put in place as currently designed.
The policy guidance would stand. Yes, sir. So, yeah. So comp plan amendment is a little different than a rezoning. They're not. They're really trying to establish some complexity in the policy guidance to respond to more than one development path, recognizing, I think they see that the commercial or mixed use that was initially envisioned here by the area plan is probably not supported by the market. So trying to move ahead with residential development. But the applicant can probably speak much more knowledgeably than I can to market conditions.
Okay. And my last question is, I know we did a lot of work previously on closing and getting a lot of alleyways. And I know they mentioned alleyway in this project. Does this conflict with what was previously done by council?
I'm not sure I understood your question. Can you just say it again so I'm sure I heard you?
Yeah, so there was a lot of work previously, actually I think almost 4 years ago, where we closed a lot of alleyways, but mainly that was in the downtown area. And I see in this plan where they mentioned the use of alleyways, and I'm asking about any potential conflict with our past policies with adding this.
Okay. Jason Myers from Transportation is here. He has approached me. I think he wants to speak to you on this issue.
All right.
Yes, thank you. A lot of old public alleys in places where they're not used, property owners adjacent to them petition for them to be abandoned as public rights of way. And that's consistent with city policy and with the comprehensive plan. A lot of different parts of our comprehensive plan suggest that privately maintained alleys by HOAs are a really good way to serve for vehicle access for narrow lots, especially townhomes, because the alternative is a set of driveways that are all very close together that basically blocks the entire street frontage from having an opportunity for on-street parking or an effective sidewalk. So I think the inclusion of some language about using alleys in a townhouse development is to help improve the public realm on the public streets rather than having garages fronting those public streets. And that is not at all in conflict with the abandonment of old, obsolete alleys. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions for staff before I open the hearing? Okay, once again, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in opposition. If we could put the countdown timer on, and once again, we will hear from Worth Mills.
Good evening again, Mayor, members of council. This is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. I do have a presentation that I think will help explain some of this better. I'll keep it as concise as I can, and then happy to answer any questions afterwards. If you could go to the second slide, please. And I'll note again that we did work extensively with transportation on these language changes, and I appreciate Jason Myers and the rest of his colleagues at the Transportation Department for their help. So if you go to slide 2, please. So just to give you an overview, the owner and the applicant of these properties has submitted a preliminary subdivision for the 7 properties subject to this comprehensive plan to facilitate a residential townhouse development. The property zoning has been in place since 2004. One of those conditions requires that the properties follow the urban design and street guidelines within the small area plan, which recommends these internal streets be constructed as Main Street parallel parking with a traffic circle. These proposed amendments would create flexibility within that small area plan to match the street type with the nature of development. They would facilitate a street network that is safer for future townhouse residents, and again, that matches the style of the development. Next slide, please. So again, just showing the 7 properties that would be subject to the subdivision plan, as well as the small area plan there of Rock Quarry and Battle Bridge. Next slide, please. So the applicants have submitted a preliminary subdivision for an 83-unit townhouse development showing 55-foot wide internal streets meeting at a conventional 4-way intersection with a mix of front and rear loaded driveways. Next slide. And on this next slide, you'll see conditions from Z1404 that includes these 7 properties plus the Food Lion Shopping Center. Condition 14 requires compliance with that neighborhood center core plan. And during the preliminary subdivision review, staff notified applicant that it must incorporate the Main Street parallel parking street types and the traffic circle. Next slide. So here we have a picture of the subdivision and the small area plan where you can see the dichotomy. Next slide, please. And again, these are the changes that we've made overall to the Rock Quarry Battle Bridge small area plan. As I mentioned, we've worked with planning and transportation departments to draft these amendments that don't outright change the small area plan guidance, but do allow for other street types if residential uses are approved. And the last slide, please. So again, just looking at comprehensive plan amendment standards, the first standard, these properties were zoned in X3 in 2004, but to date, nothing's been developed on these 7 parcels. Creating a more flexible small area plan allows for a wider range of uses, including residential uses here. For the third standard, these amendments facilitate residential development next to an existing shopping center, which can help reduce the need to drive for certain goods and services. And for the fourth standard, these amendments are consistent with key comprehensive plan policies, the most significant being LU 6.1, composition of mixed-use centers, which recommends a mix of commercial and residential uses within these centers. We believe that these amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff has given their seal of approval, transportation in particular, and we feel that these are the best amendments that we can put forward to create that traditional mixed-use development within the small area plan. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Worth? Okay, I'm then going to close the hearing. Councilmember Branch.
I move for approval.
Okay, do we have a second? Mayor Pro Tem Stewart has seconded. All in favor? That was unanimous, clerk. Thank you. Next, we have text change TC 2220 multiple module height method. Again, no one has signed up to speak on this.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Justin Romero with Planning and Development. This is text change 22-20, the multiple module building height method. It's a text change that aims to improve how the UDO addresses sites with significant topography changes and the unique challenges that are presented from that sloping terrain. It adds an option that would live alongside the existing building height measurement methodology to the code. as a separate option that could be utilized for these sloping sites. It's a short history. Of course, these text change results from the hillside development study that originated back in the fall of 2017, was later refined after stakeholder and public input in 2019, and ultimately resulted in a policy guidance report for 6 kind of specific areas of code. Of course, this text change addresses numbers 1 and 3 that you see there on the screen, neighborhood transition zones and the measurement of building height. The others have been addressed or are being addressed currently with either recent or currently being drafted text changes. And again, the goal here is to provide some flexibility to the current method of measuring building height. It would allow an applicant to break buildings into separate modules, and then with each module having its own unique and separate building height measurement, as opposed to just one for each building, as is the case today. The hope is that this would encourage buildings to follow topography in the land. And there is also, of course, some the structure of this text change resulted in some need to kind of reorganize section 1.5.7, which is the building height section of the code, to be a little bit more user-friendly and kind of distinguish between the available options for measuring building height. And there's specific language that clarifies which building facades and facades are used in the measurement of height. There's clarifying language that allows different ground floors when the multiple module approach is being utilized. Now, that's important when considering things like requirements for active uses on ground floors and transparency and blank wall requirements. Kind of a separate but related change is just a clarification to the neighborhood transition zone requirements in the zone C, height limitations, and I have a graphic later on that should explain that one. This is a building that's in the Village District today. It was actually developed under the old code prior to the UDO's adoption, but it provides an example of a structure that may not be able to be built today due to the only the single building method being available today. There's kind of 2 graphics that further illustrate the point a little bit. The current regulations are on the left, so height, each building gets its own, must stand on its own and gets one overall height measurement. The proposed additional option would allow the breaking up of a building into several modules, and again, with each getting its own building height. So these slides kind of show some typical what you might see in a 4-story max zoning district today. Number 1 on the top shows the typical result that you would see under today's code, whereas the low portion of the site gets held up with a retaining wall or a foundation wall, and then the builder maximizes their maximum allotment of stories on top of that. And so, as you see in number 2, the area highlighted in yellow, if that area were converted to habitable or conditioned space, it would be classified as an additional story, and that building would be a 5-story building and not allowed in the 4-story zoning district, even though it's no taller than what you see in number 1. And so number 3 is an option that a developer might have where it would step with topography, but of course they lose that buildable area that you see cross-hatched in yellow, so we don't typically see that result. And what the text change is really trying to get at is scenario number 4 there, that allows the building to be broken up into modules, with each kind of module having 4 stories. So floor area is maximized, but the building is really no taller than what you would see in number 1 above. And here's 2 kind of renderings that kind of illustrate the same point. On the left is what you see today. Again, the foundation wall on the lower end of the site with the continuous floor plate with 3 stories on top of that. The building on the right, under the module method, would allow the lower end of the site to be utilized. And again, this would under today's code, the building on the right would be classified as a 4-story building and not allowed in the 3-story zoning district. There's just a few graphics that will be inserted into the code that just show the current. Again, you see module B there on the left in red would be the applicable building elevations that will be used in determining the starting point for measuring height. On the right, you have the additional option that's being added where B1, B2, and B3, respectively, could be their own separate modules for measuring height. And finally, again, this is just a separate but related change. This is just a clarification to the neighborhood transition zone requirements. So to kind of prevent the scenario, so the neighborhood transition zones apply in the mixed-use zoning districts when they're adjacent to a residential district nearby. And the clarification is that in Zone C of the neighborhood transition, there's a 40-foot height limit for structures located within that zone. The clarification is just that this is measured from the pre-development grade as opposed to a post-development or finished grade to kind of prevent the scenario on the left there you see where the low end of the site is filled in with the retaining wall, and then the structure gets a 40-foot height limit on top of that, which then looms over the adjacent residential structure, which kind of defeats the purpose of that regulation. So that's just a clarification that in this particular case, height's measured from the pre-development grade. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, I just want to say to staff, I really appreciate you including visuals in there. It makes it so much easier to kind of picture as opposed to just seeing drawings. So thank you for doing that. I am going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Stewart.
Yes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 2nd, 2021, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment.
Okay, that has been seconded by Councilmember Knight. All in favor? Clerk, that is unanimous. Okay, and then our last public hearing this evening is text change TC 1321, vehicle fuel sales standards.
Okay, this is text change was an external change filed by a member of the public back in July of this year. It was authorized at your August 17th meeting, and it proposes modifications to specific use standards for vehicle fuel sales in mixed-use districts, including NX, CX, DX, and IX. So the current regulations require what's called a Type 2 protective yard when a vehicle fuel sales use is proposed adjacent to a residential district or a residential use. And that Type 2 yard, you see the graphic on the right there, is a 20-foot wide landscaped area with a 6.5-foot solid masonry wall on the property line with landscaping behind that, landscaping consisting of shade trees, understory trees, and shrubbery. And just kind of 2 points of nuance with this particular protective yard. In contrast to the neighborhood transition zones that you'll see on the next slide, an applicant typically has a suite of options from which to choose from when choosing what protective yard they install that range from narrower options with more significant screening material to wider options with less screening material. In this particular case, the Type 2 protective yard is the only option. Also of note is that some options do provide, in those cases, a choice between a wall and a fence. This one does prescribe that the 6.5-foot fence is required. And the applicant's not proposing to change anything related to the protective yard. It's just the trigger of when it's applied. And so these are the neighborhood transition graphics you'll see on the right, where typically a suite of options is presented for an applicant. But as proposed, the text change would require the Type 2 protective yard only when the actual fuel pump island itself is within 100 feet of a residential district or use. The graphic there is just two existing fuel cell uses on New Bern Avenue that are adjacent to some residential uses. We do have another graphic towards the end that I think should illustrate kind of the crux of the issue a little better. But again, the applicant's stated purpose here is that the current rules really don't account for the distance between the actual use itself and the adjacent residential district uses. It's more of a blunt tool that's applied just based on the use itself and adjacent uses, and doesn't take into account property size or the distance between the uses. And also notes that the fuel pump island itself is really kind of the central node of activity that on the site where any kind of negative impacts that may occur to nearby residential uses would originate from. And so what would happen if the text change were adopted? Certain sites that are large enough would not have to provide this Type 2 protective yard. It would also kind of close a potential loophole where a small lot or could be created under the current rules between the two uses to kind of absolve someone from having to install that protective yard as well. Again, the I'll just reiterate, the protective yard standard is not changing, it's just the trigger of when it's applied. And this graphic hopefully illustrates it for you. This is an existing shopping center on Creedmoor Road. You see on the bottom right in the red crosshatch is a proposed fuel sales use. It's nearly 500 feet from an adjacent property line and located behind or in front of the main kind of anchor building in the shopping center. But on this site, under current rules, that Type 2 protective yard would be required along that residential 10 zoned property line to the north, whereas as proposed, since it's more than 100 feet from the property line, it would not be required. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff on this? Councilmember Cox.
So in that example on Creedmoor Road, if you could go back to that real quick. Is there a way you can bring that back up on the screen?
Yeah, we're bringing it up right now.
Okay. Okay, so under the proposed change, that area in green would not be required, so there would be no wall. Is that true? And no vegetation? I mean, what would be there under the proposed rule?
Yes, sir, that's a good question. Under the proposal, the installation or a vehicle fuel sales use in and of itself would not require the installation of any protective yard along that property boundary. Now, it's quite possible that neighborhood transition requirements are not being changed with this. So, for example, if that R10 property contained single-family homes or duplexes, and this shopping center came in to develop today, or expanded in a significant manner, that protective yard would be required. But under this proposal, solely the installation of a vehicle fuel sales use would not in and of itself trigger that requirement if it were more than 100 feet away from the, yeah.
Right, and I can see, you know, this is kind of a contrived example of an extreme situation where we're saying that the fuel sales is what triggered the protective yard. I'm not entirely convinced that the fuel sales is what's triggering the protective yard in this situation. I am concerned about fuel sales that are like, say, 101 feet away from a property line, and therefore there's no protective yard. That is a concern, and not this contrived example. So that's my comment. I will be voting against this proposal. I just think that if you're going to have fuel sales and they're going to be, you know, within 100 feet of a property line to residential, then we need to continue to have this protective yard.
Councilmember Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, I have some additional background that might be helpful, and staff can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is that something that's going on in the industry is people are modernizing gas stations. They look a lot nicer. They got new LED lighting, entertainment things on the pumps. And I understood that this request was prompted by, they were seeking a little more accommodation. Sorry about the cat. They were seeking a little accommodation so that this redevelopment activity could happen. I've seen one rezoning case that came through in my district that was a little different, but similar situation. And there's a news station on Capitol Boulevard across from my district. And it actually turns out to be a lot nicer, which was my point in that accommodating this, I actually think is going to be a benefit. Although I hear you, Mr. Cox, if 100 feet is not the right number for you, you certainly entitled to vote no. I'm comfortable with this, and I'd propose that we move forward with it.
Okay, no one has signed up to speak on this case. In opposition, we do have people who are here to speak in support. So thank you, staff, for the presentation. I am going to open the public hearing, and we'll put up 8 minutes. I have signed up Matthew Carpenter, Garrett Maravets, and Megan Fitzsimmons. Is anybody here to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant. Also on the call and available for questions are Garrett Maravets of Harris Teeter and Megan Fitzsimmons of Kimley Horn. Text changes aren't tied to any specific property, as you know, but I think, as you just alluded to, it'd be helpful to understand the context here of how this arose. As an added convenience for shoppers, Harris Teeter is seeking to construct an HT fuel center with several gas pumps in the parking lot of the existing Harris Teeter at 7400 Creedmoor Road, which was actually the diagram that was shown by staff. It is the actual property. And the fuel center would be on the same tax parcel as the existing grocery store, but at the front of the site near Creedmoor Road. And the rear of the store is adjacent to the Stonehenge apartment complex. And both of these properties have existed in this configuration since the mid-'80s. And there's currently a mature planted buffer behind the Harris Teeter store that varies in width that will go untouched with this project. And so in discussing plans with the city, Harris Teeter became aware that the fuel center at the front of the parking lot could trigger the requirement for the medium protective yard at the rear of the store, which, as Justin stated, would include a 6.5-foot wall. And the issue here is that because the fuel center and the grocery store would be on the same tax parcel, the vehicle fuel sales buffer is being applied to the rear of the grocery store. And, it's worth noting that the fuel centers would be about 500 feet from the apartments, and the use of the grocery store and the buffer at the rear of the property will not change. And the proposed language fixes this misapplication by changing the trigger for the buffer requirement. And under the proposed language, a Type 2 protective yard would be required when a fuel pump island is located within 100 feet of a residential district or a residential use. So it's not changing the buffer that would be required, it's just changing the trigger from adjacency to when the property is when the fuel pump island is within 100 feet of a residential use or district. And to Councilmember Cox's question about what buffer would be required, I think most of the time, if you have a gas station next to residential property, if it's on, I think R1, R2, R4, R6, or even R10 in some situations, then the neighborhood transition yard would be required, which would include a 10 to 50 foot protective yard, a 50-foot use restricted area, and a 50-foot height restricted area. And so to conclude, we think this is a modest change and it will better apply the vehicle fuel sales buffer requirement. And we respectfully ask that the council approve this text change. We're also available for any questions. And as I mentioned, Garrett and Megan are also with me.
Okay, Councilmember Cox has a question.
Okay, so you have a very specific use case, and I understand what you're asking for, but why 100 feet? Your gas station is going to be some 500 feet from the property line, so why not change the trigger to 400 feet from the property line instead of 100 feet? I mean, 100 feet is just too close. Right. And you know, going to 100 feet, changing the trigger to 100 feet, that's like using a sledgehammer to deal with one very small specific situation. I'm curious to know why you just didn't go to the Board of Adjustment and ask for a variance in this case. And instead of requesting a text change that's going to affect the city, you know, everything's citywide. And if we can't get a variance, then why not change the trigger to say 400 or 450 feet instead of 100 feet?
Well, first of all, to answer your variance question, we can't apply for a variance because this is a use standard in Chapter 6. And so the code doesn't allow variances. And the 100-foot distance, we picked it for the application. We weren't, you know, there was no specific reason for that distance. And we did discuss with Planning Commission and staff a larger distance, but Planning Commission and staff felt that a larger distance could inadvertently impact existing gas stations within the city. And, you know, we wanted to minimize the unintended consequences of this text change. So you're right that we have more than 100 feet here, but we're trying to think about the implications on other stores throughout the city.
Okay, I just can't, support something that puts the trigger so close to residential. I mean, if the trigger was further away, like I say, 400 feet, then fine, I can consider supporting that. But I can't consider, changing the trigger to 100 feet from residential.
Any other questions for the applicant? I have a question for staff. When you talk about unintended consequences, so if we increased it from 100 to say 200 or whatnot, that it would put existing gas stations or service stations in non-compliance. Can you explain that to me further?
So any existing gas station that would be in existence prior to your adoption of this ordinance would just be non-conforming and would be allowed to remain that way into perpetuity. They would not have to be brought into compliance until some future time when they either redeveloped or significantly expanded.
And did you all look at potentially any negative unintended consequences with the 100 feet?
We felt that 100 feet was sufficient in that it was enough to account for noise, odor, traffic, etc., that would be generated from the fuel pump islands themselves. And then in addition to that, account for things like refuse areas, drive aisles, And taking all of that into consideration, we, in working with the applicant, we did feel that the 100 feet was sufficient in this case.
In this case?
For this particular use, yes, ma'am.
I guess my question was related to other potential cases. I'm just trying to figure out if there's any unintended consequences. I'm trying to address Mr. Cox's concern, not put you on the spot.
Sure. No, it's a matter of picking the right number, right? It's you could pick a number greater than 100 feet, anywhere between 1 and 500. You could pick a greater number than that. What the applicant proposed was 100. In staff's working with the applicant, again, we felt 100 was sufficient in that it would cover the impacts of the fuel use itself, and then things that are commonly associated with this type of use. So an area for refuse, at lighting, drive aisles between parking lots and such. So that 100 feet would still be enough to kind of provide for all those things and provide a distance from adjacent residential uses.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, my question is, any existing service station currently has to have a protective yard regardless based on our current policy, correct?
Correct. Any that were developed since the adoption of the UDO up until today, that's correct.
Yeah, so this is really for anything new. I'm comfortable with us going probably 250. You know, we're kind of, I think that's workable. If Councilman Cox will be there, I think if we just made a motion for 250, we can go from there. Just thinking where new service stations may be built going forward. A lot of them are actually larger than our older service stations. So they're going to have others. They're going to be other transition regulations that I think are going to require a protective yard. But, you know, to move this forward, you know, that would be my recommendation.
I'm concerned about just pulling a number out of the air without.
Well, it sounds like they pulled 100 out of the air.
Well, but there was study on it. Staff looked at that and examined it. I mean, that's what they presented to us tonight. We're just pulling a number out of the air, and that I don't have context with that, so that kind of concerns me. And so I would like some staff feedback on that. Councilmember Cox, I'll get to you in a minute, please.
So I'm sorry, you'd like me to comment on the 100-foot number?
No, Councilmember Branch just said suggested 250 feet. And so my statement was, I'm kind of a little uncomfortable just pulling number out of the air without having staff look at the number. And so I'm looking for some feedback.
So the potential consequence with a larger number like that is that smaller sites, it's possible that they could not be eligible at all for this type of use, right? If they were, if the site wasn't deep enough to be able to provide 250 feet or whatever number you came up with.
Councilmember Cox and Councilmember Buffkin.
Yeah, this doesn't change. This only triggers when the protective yard is used. We're not saying that we have to have a gas station with 250 feet of distance. That's not what it's saying at all. You could have a gas station closer. It's just that if it's closer, it's going to trigger a protective yard.
And as staff just said, a higher number could mean some potential locations could not be used for that because of that. Councilmember Buffkin?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So on this question, staff, can you help me out with this? And that's it, what I expected, like I said, with my experience with this issue. So this would affect like small corner gas stations. That would be the concern. And if they're old, they want to redevelop, then they wouldn't be able to redevelop. I mean, am I understanding you right on that? Because of this?
Yes, sir. I mean, it at a certain point, whatever number you pick, sites that are not sufficiently deep enough to accommodate that that width would be entirely ineligible for this type of use. As you heard the applicant say correctly, that it is a use standard, so it is a standard that is not allowed to be varied by the Board of Adjustment currently, so you can't go to the Board of Adjustment and ask for hardship variance in these cases. Staff certainly doesn't have an issue with a number greater than 100. You know, we were there's basis in the code today for similar types of things, having a 100-foot requirement, and then again with looking at what would need to be accommodated on this type of site, we felt that 100 was sufficient, but we certainly don't have any concerns with a greater number. I don't know what the applicant would say.
Councilmember Buffkin, then Councilmember Branch.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief follow-up. Do we have any idea how many sites are affected? You know, if we start moving the number?
Don't have that data today. We can certainly get that for you if you're interested in the number of existing gas stations in mixed-use districts. We could certainly get that for you.
Okay, well, if we got to bring it back, I guess that would be helpful. I'll say I'm ready to make a motion to approve that if the council's ready.
Okay, Councilmember Branch.
So my last question, if we had someone that wanted to build a service station right now, and it was 99 feet from residential, would they have to do a protective yard as of today?
Under both the current code and as proposed, they would. Yes, sir.
Okay. So really, we're talking about new properties. Regardless, our current policy requires this. What we're saying is, if you are, with my idea, if it's 251 feet from the residential property line, they will not have to do a protective yard. If they're 249 feet or closer, they will have to do a protective yard. Only thing we're adding with this number is adding something that right now must be done, and we're saying you only have to do it if you're within so many feet. And Councilman Cox's issue was that 100 feet he felt was too close, and the more I think about it, it makes sense. If someone was 100 feet today, they would have to do it. If they were 50 feet today, they would have to do it. So all we're saying is, if you're over a certain part, you don't have to do it. And I think that's what the applicant is saying. As of right now, this applicant would have to build a protective yard. We're putting a number in to say, if you're beyond this distance, you don't have to. The question we have to decide as a council is, what is the number?
Councilmember Cox.
And I'm certainly willing to compromise on that number. I think Mr. Branch offers a very reasonable compromise.
Let me ask this question of the applicant. Is there a deadline on this that you're trying to meet?
Hey, thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. I was trying to get unmuted for a while there. I
understand.
First of all, I think the applicant would be comfortable with a larger distance we're okay with that. And as far as a timeline, I'd like Garrett Marvets to answer that. If he's still on, he could be unmuted.
Could we unmute Garrett, please? Derek?
Garrett, you're unmuted. I'm not seeing any audio movement from Garrett. Garrett, you are unmuted.
Well, I'll add, Mayor Baldwin, that I think this project has been in the works for over a year, and so it's certainly urgent, but there's not a specific contractual deadline or otherwise that I know of that's coming up.
I was going to suggest perhaps sending this to committee for a quick review. And again, I'm not comfortable just pulling a number out and saying this is what we should do. I think we should make a more data-driven decision. So I'm trying to make a determination whether sending it to committee would be a hardship for the applicant.
We would prefer that it would be voted on tonight, even if that means a larger buffer. I mean, a larger trigger distance for the buffer requirement.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, sorry about that. Trying to figure out audio issues here. This is Garrett Marbest with Harris Teeter. We don't have any contractual deadlines regarding the project here, but as always, we've spent quite a few months here working with staff, trying to work through this issue. And again, it has been, I believe, studied at pretty much length here regarding this 100-foot. And again, with this specific case, I don't think we would be opposed to expanding that 100-foot range. But what we would hope to do is not have to go through this process again. These fuel centers are a very large priority for us in adding them to our store fleet. And so what we would hope to do is not have to go through this at, the next shopping center we come to, that it is, 251 feet. I'm not saying that that's the number or 100 is the number, but again, we worked through this pretty at length with staff to hopefully address all of the current concerns here.
Councilmember Buffkin.
Well, thank you, Mayor. May I suggest maybe that we bring this back at our next meeting rather than going to committee? It's just 2 weeks, and we could get some help from our staff, maybe some examples of what they're trying to accommodate and what they're trying to avoid in the way of unintended consequences, and as the mayor said, some data. I mean, how far away can you actually smell a gas pump? Might be helpful to know. Could we do that rather than going to committee? That going into the holidays, it may be the first of the year before it gets back out.
Is everybody okay holding this for 2 weeks, allowing staff to collect more information? Can I see thumbs up or down, or Mr. Cox?
Well, I'm not going to change my position. I think 100 feet is too close. I think Mr. Branch has offered a good compromise. I think Harris Teeter would be prudent to be good neighbors and not locate their gas stations so close to residential.
It's not what I was asking. I was asking you.
So I'm giving you my answer, and my answer is no. I think 250 feet is a good compromise, and I would be willing to vote on that tonight.
Okay, the majority of you said thumbs up to 2 weeks, so let's do what the majority has asked. Come back to us with more data so we are comfortable making an informed decision. Thank you, and I'm going to leave the hearing open.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that is it for this evening. Thank you to staff for your good work. Thank you to everyone for bearing with us. And if we could put this back on the agenda as a special item for our next meeting, that would be helpful. So thank you, everyone. Yes, clerk?
Are you saying special item or continuing the hearing?
Well, it's a day meeting, so it doesn't matter. We'll continue the hearing. It's during the day.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and a good rest of the week. And we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.